Hello and welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a video script called Every Hot Sauce Explained in 5 Minutes from the creator Food Discover.
We both had a look and we're ready to jump right in with some feedback.
Great. So the first thing that really stood out, I think, is the overall structure. There's an opportunity to really strengthen the narrative thread.
I agree. That's the most pressing thing. Right now it reads as a disjointed list. You get Tabasco, then Sriracha, then Piri Piri, and there's no real glue holding them together.
Right. The transitions feel a bit abrupt. You're jumping from Louisiana to Thailand to Africa to Korea, and it feels like we're just flipping through index cards.
Exactly. You're relying on the audience to make these huge geographical leaps without any kind of bridge.
So the suggestion then is to maybe rethink the organization.
Right. Instead of organizing it just by geography, what if we organize it by the historical trade routes that spread chili peppers around the globe?
Okay. So you turn a list of facts into a story about global culinary evolution.
Precisely. You're not just saying, here's a sauce from Africa, you're explaining how the main ingredient even got to Africa. It's really the story of the Columbian exchange.
That makes a lot of sense. The script actually gives us the perfect material for this. It mentions Portuguese explorers bringing bird's eye chilies to Africa for piri piri.
And then later on, it mentions they also introduced peppers to Korea, which led to gochujang.
But the 2 points are totally separate in the script.
That's the missed opportunity. I mean, why not link them explicitly? Instead of going from piri piri to harissa, jump straight from piri piri to gochujang.
And show the divergence. You can talk about how the exact same historical influence
And the Portuguese trade route?
results in two completely different things. In Mozambique, you get this simple, fresh marinade.
Piri piri.
And then in Korea, you get this incredibly complex, months-long fermentation process. With sweet rice, it becomes a much deeper story about how culture shapes an ingredient.
That also fixes the beginning of the script, doesn't it? It currently starts with Tabasco from 1868.
Which feels a little late in the game. You're starting in the middle of the story. The script makes a great case for aji being the real ancestor. It says aji peppers were cultivated, 7,000 years ago in South America?
So the actionable advice is to use aji as the year zero starting point. Yes, ground the listener in the true origin with the Incas before you get to the Columbian exchange. Start there, show the spread via the Portuguese, and then you can land on the modern commercial sauces like Tabasco. It creates a journey that's just much easier to follow.
Okay, moving to our second point. This is more about the core essence of the piece. Right now, it feels like it's flattening everything under the one umbrella of hot sauce.
Yeah, and that's a huge risk. It creates this false equivalency between a table condiment like Tabasco and a cooking base like, say, Turkish pepper paste.
A novice cook might watch this and think they're all interchangeable.
Right. So the suggestion is to draw a much sharper distinction between what we could call finishing sauces and cooking foundations.
You're helping the audience understand how to use the information, not just memorize.
Exactly. If I buy Tabasco, I know to put it on my eggs. If I buy doubanjiang and put it straight on my eggs, I'm going to have a very, very confusing breakfast.
The script even points this out. The section on doubanjiang says it's usually cooked into dishes as a base sauce rather than used as a topping.
So lean into that. Contrast it immediately with something like chili crisp. The source notes that chili crisp is drizzled on dumplings, even on ice cream.
One is a foundational flavor, the other's a textural finishing touch.
And you see it again with the Turkish pepper paste. The script calls it sun-dried, salty, used in cooking, not eaten straight.
So maybe create a little segment, something like the builds versus the bursts.
I love that. Contrast the slow-building, mellow heat of the Turkish paste with the immediate acidic punch of a vinegar-based Tabasco. One is a bass note, the other's a cymbal crash.
Or that insanely hot but fruity Scotch bonnet sauce.
Right. By grouping them this way, you're actually teaching the viewer how to cook. You're elevating the content from just trivia to genuine utility.
The person watching walks away knowing what to do with the bottle they just bought. That's way more valuable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that brings us to our third topic, which is about significance and relevance. The script uses a lot of these great little origin stories and bits of folklore.
It does. We've got monks, smugglers, evil spirits. It's all there. But the weakness is that it kind of treats them like fun facts, like trivia.
It's entertaining, but it doesn't answer the so what question. Why do these stories actually matter?
So the suggestion is to pivot from just retelling the myths to analyzing the function of these myths. What do they tell us about the sauce's identity?
Let's take the sriracha story. The source says a woman in 1930s Thailand was blessed by a monk to produce it.
Which is a fascinating detail, but just stating it misses the cultural context.
We need to dig into why that blessing actually mattered.
Exactly. The critique is to ask why divine or spiritual approval was part of a commercial product in 1932 Thailand. It suggests food production was tied to community and well-being, not just profit. The monk's blessing wasn't a marketing gimmick. It was a stamp of approval.
You could apply that same lens to the Scotch bonnet folklore. The script claims its heat could chase away evil spirits.
And instead of just leaving it there, connect it to the data. The script says the Scotch bonnet hits what? 100,000 to 350,000 Scoville units. That is serious heat.
So the heat isn't just a flavor, it's almost a form of spiritual protection.
Precisely. The physical intensity of the sensation acts as a barrier. The pain is the point. That's a much more compelling story than just saying it's spicy.
And there's a great contrast built into the script already. You have the sriracha blessing.
And then you have the Tabasco origin story with the McIlhenny family.
Right, where the text says they smuggled the original seeds from Mexico.
That's a perfect thematic contrast. The Western story is about smuggling, secrecy, intellectual property. The Eastern story is about blessings and community. Highlighting that gives the script so much more depth. It's not just food history anymore. It's cultural anthropology.
Okay, so moving to the fourth area for feedback, completeness and focus, specifically with the technical metrics.
Yes, the Scoville units. This is a classic issue. There's a real lack of consistency in how heat is quantified here.
Some entries get hard data, but for others it's just vague adjectives. It's really hard for the audience to rank them mentally.
It is. So the suggestion is to adopt a standardized data versus experience format for every single entry. If you have a Scoville number, you have to use it. If not, you have to compare it to a known benchmark.
Let's see. The script gives us numbers for Tabasco, sriracha, Scotch bonnet, sambal. That's a good start.
But then you get to harissa. The script says store-bought is as hot as Tabasco, but restaurant versions can hit 20,000. That's a huge range.
And the listener has to do all the math in their head.
Yeah, so let's visualize it for them. Don't just give them numbers. Say something like, harissa can range from the same heat as Tabasco all the way up to 4 times hotter. Give them a multiplier.
Use Tabasco as a kind of metric ruler for everything else.
Exactly. Most people know what Tabasco feels like. Anchor the new information to that.
What about the Turkish pepper paste? It's listed at up to 8,000 Scoville, but the text calls it mellow.
That sounds like a contradiction, right? 8,000 is hotter than Tabasco's max of 5,000. This is where the script needs to explain the difference between chemical heat and perceived heat.
Because it's a base, it's not a burst of heat.
Right. Frame it as mild but persistent heat. Compare it to the aggressive heat of the Scotch bonnet. The script needs to explain that 8,000 Scoville in an oily paste feels totally different than 5,000 Scoville in a thin vinegar sauce.
And there's a big hole in the chili crisp section. There's no Scoville unit at all.
So that's where you have to lean into texture. Frame it as a textural experience, more than a heat experience. Make it clear that you eat chili crisp for the crunch, not necessarily the burn.
Okay, last topic. This one's about the angle and originality. Let's talk about preservation methods.
This is the science angle, and I think it's the most interesting undeveloped part of the script. The weakness is that it mentions ingredients like vinegar, salt, and oil, but it doesn't really connect them to the fact that hot sauce is fundamentally a technology of preservation.
The listener is missing that link between how it's made and why it tastes the way it does. The ingredients are presented as flavor choices, not, survival necessities from a pre-refrigeration era.
That's it exactly. The suggestion is to group the sauces by their preservation technique. Is it fermentation, sun-drying, acid carrying? That explains the final flavor.
So, looking at the aged sauces, we have Tabasco, which the script says is aged for 3 years in oak barrels.
Which is basically a whiskey-making technique that fermentation breaks down the sharp, raw notes and creates that funky depth.
And you can compare that to something like Zug, which is fermented with salt for just a few days.
Or gochujang, aged for months or years. These are all fermentation. but the thyme and the other ingredients completely change the outcome.
This is also where you can explain why Turkish pepper paste is so salt. The script says it right there. Salt is the preservative.
It's not salty just to be salty. It's salty so it doesn't rot on a roof in Turkey.
The flavor is a byproduct of the method. And then you contrast all of these preserved sauces with the fresh aji sauce, which the script says uses tomatoes, cilantro, and water.
And water is the enemy of preservation. It is. So because ajili is fresh and water-based, its shelf life and flavor are completely different from barrel-aged Tabasco. It has to be eaten quickly. This adds a layer of food science that just elevates the whole piece.
It changes the script from a list of what into an explanation of why.
And that's always the goal, isn't it? If you explain the why, the viewer learns something they can actually apply.
This has been really productive. Just to recap the main actionable points for the creator.
First, resequence the narrative around trade routes. Start with aji, then use the Portuguese influence to connect peri-peri and gochujang.
Second, create clear categories. Separate the cooking bases from the finishing condiments to give the audience real utility.
Third, standardize the heat metrics. Use Scoville units, but translate them into simple multipliers against a baseline like Tabasco. And fourth, analyze the origin myths. Don't just retell them. Contrast the Western and Eastern stories.
And finally, lean into the science. Explain how preservation methods like fermentation and sun-drying are what actually create the distinct flavor profiles.
Yeah, if those changes are made, this stops being just a video about hot sauce and becomes a video about history, culture, and science. A much stronger piece of content.
We want to thank the creator, Food Discover, for the submission. It's got great potential.
Absolutely. The raw materials are all here. It just needs a stronger architectural frame.
We invite you to make some of these changes and resubmit the script for a follow-up. We'd love to see how it evolves.
Can't wait to read it.
Thank you for listening to The Critique.